The day I found out my grandmother left me nothing, I was standing in a parking lot in the rain, still in my scrubs, still smelling like the hospital. My phone rang. It was my cousin Denise. She didn't even say hello. She just said, "Renee, you need to call a lawyer. Like, today." I didn't understand what she meant. Grandma Ruth had passed 3 weeks earlier, quietly, in her sleep, the way she always said she wanted to go. The funeral was behind us. The grief was still fresh. The last thing I was thinking about was money. But Denise wasn't calling about grief. She was calling because my sister Vanessa had already been to the estate attorney, already signed documents, already transferred the house, Grandma Ruth's house, the one on Clover Lane where we'd spent every Christmas, every Easter, every summer of our childhoods, into her name. And she had done it 10 days after the funeral, while I was working double shifts at the hospital and hadn't even had time to cry properly yet. I stood there in the rain for a long time after Denise hung up, not crying, just thinking. That's when I realized, this didn't happen by accident. Let me tell you something about Vanessa. To the outside world, she is everything. Warm smile, perfect hair, the kind of woman who brings homemade pie to neighborhood gatherings and remembers everyone's birthday. People adore her. She has this way of making you feel seen, like you're the most important person in the room. I used to admire it when we were kids. It took me a long time to understand that it was a tool, not a trait. And let me tell you something about me. I'm the quiet one. Always have been. I became a nurse at 31, worked nights for years so I could save money and take care of Grandma Ruth when her health started slipping. I drove 40 minutes each way to her house every weekend for the last 4 years of her life. I managed her medications, took her to her appointments, sat with her through 2 hospital stays. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I loved her, and because no one else was showing up. Vanessa lived 20 minutes from Grandma Ruth. She visited maybe 4 times a year. She always had a reason. The kids, the schedule, the job. Grandma Ruth never complained. She wasn't that kind of woman. But I noticed. I always noticed. Our mother passed when Vanessa and I were teenagers, and after that, Grandma Ruth became everything to both of us. She was our anchor, our safe place, the woman who kept our family from completely falling apart. She had a modest life, a paid-off house, a small savings account, a few pieces of jewelry, but what she had, she'd earned. She grew up with nothing. She built something small and solid and full of love, and she was careful about what happened to it after she was gone. I thought I knew what her wishes were. We'd talked about it, in that gentle way you talk about hard things with someone you love. She'd told me, more than once, that she wanted the house to stay in the family, that she wanted it handled fairly. I had no idea she'd already put it in writing, and I had no idea what Vanessa had done with that writing. The attorney's name was Mr. Caldwell. I called his office the morning after Denise's phone call, and when I told him who I was, there was a pause on the line that told me everything I needed to know before he said a single word. He told me a will had been filed. He told me Vanessa had presented it. He told me that according to the document, the house, and the majority of the estate had been left solely to Vanessa, with a small jewelry bequest for me. He read me the language. It was cold, clinical, nothing like the way Grandma Ruth spoke or thought. I asked him if I could see a copy of the will. Another pause. He said Vanessa had instructed him that any requests from other family members should be directed through her. I hung up and sat very still for a very long time. The truth was much worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a paperwork error. Vanessa had gotten to the attorney before anyone else. She'd controlled the narrative from the moment Grandma Ruth took her last breath. And because she was charming and organized and nobody ever questioned her motives, it had worked. But I wasn't nobody. And I wasn't done. I hired my own attorney, a woman named Patricia Osei who specialized in estate disputes and had the kind of calm, precise energy that made you feel like the truth was always going to come out eventually. It was just a matter of when. She told me the first thing we needed to do was get a copy of the actual will on file with the court and compare it against any previous versions. That's when things started to unravel. Grandma Ruth had worked with an estate planning attorney years earlier, a different one, in a different town, a man named Harold Sims who had since retired. Patricia tracked him down. He remembered Grandma Ruth clearly. He said she had been meticulous, deliberate, specific. And he still had his copy of the original will she drafted with him 7 years ago. It was nothing like the one Vanessa had filed. In Harold Sims' version, the house was to be split equally between both sisters. The savings account was to be divided fairly, with a portion set aside for Grandma Ruth's grandchildren's education. There was a note attached, handwritten, in Grandma Ruth's careful cursive, explaining her reasoning, her love for both of us, her hopes for what the family would look like after she was gone. The will Vanessa had filed had been signed just 14 months before Grandma Ruth died, during a period when Grandma Ruth had been dealing with the early stages of cognitive decline. Patricia looked at me across her desk and said, quietly, "We need to talk about undue influence." I thought I understood the situation. I thought this was about a forged document or a legal technicality. But what it was actually about was the 4 years I had spent in that house, the 4 years of appointments and medications and long Sunday afternoons sitting with a woman who was slowly slowly losing pieces of herself. And during that time, Vanessa had swooped in, found the right moment, and convinced a vulnerable old woman to change her will. The court date was set for a Tuesday in March. I didn't tell most of the family. I didn't want the drama, didn't want Vanessa tipped off about what we'd found. Patricia had subpoenaed Grandma Ruth's medical records from the period when the new will was signed. She had a statement from Harold Sims. She had testimony from 2 of Grandma Ruth's neighbors who remembered Vanessa coming around frequently in that specific window of time, and remembered that Grandma Ruth had seemed confused afterward, had called one of them to ask questions about papers she'd signed but didn't fully understand. Vanessa walked into that courtroom like she owned it. She was dressed beautifully, composed, with the same warm expression she wore everywhere. Her attorney was polished and confident. She sat at the table across from me and gave me a look that was equal parts pity and dismissal. She thought this was going to be a formality. She thought I was going to fold. What happened next shocked everyone in that room. The judge, a measured, deliberate woman named Judge Harmon, announced that before proceeding with testimony, she had a document to enter into the record. It had been discovered during the court's own review of the estate file. A letter, sealed, in Grandma Ruth's handwriting, marked, to be opened only in the event of a dispute. The room went completely silent. Judge Harmon read it aloud. Grandma Ruth had written it 2 years before she died, during a period of clarity, and she had sent it directly to the court with instructions for it to be held in sealed record. She had suspected, because she knew her granddaughters, she knew both of them completely, that there might be a dispute. She wrote that she loved Vanessa. She wrote that she also saw Vanessa clearly. She wrote that in her final years, the granddaughter who had shown up, who had sacrificed her weekends and her sleep and her own life to sit beside her, to hold her hand through fear and confusion and loss, was Renee. She wrote, I do not want the one who loved me quietly to be punished for her quietness. I want her to know that I saw her. I always saw her. She wrote that her original will, the one filed with Harold Sims, represented her true and uninfluenced wishes, and that any document signed in the final 2 years of her life should be examined carefully, because she was not always herself. I had to press my hands flat on the table to keep them from shaking. Vanessa's attorney asked for a recess. Vanessa herself had gone completely still. That warm, composed expression was gone. What was underneath it was something rawer, not remorse, not yet, maybe not ever, but the recognition that she had been seen too, that Grandma Ruth had known, that she had planned for exactly this. The judge denied the recess. The ruling came 3 weeks later. The fraudulently obtained will was invalidated. The original will was reinstated. The house was to be divided equally, as Grandma Ruth had always intended. Vanessa was ordered to repay the estate for legal costs and for funds she had withdrawn from the savings account in the months following the funeral. She didn't speak to me after that. Some members of the family took her side. Others called me, quietly, to say they were sorry, that they should have seen it sooner, that they didn't know. My Aunt Carol, our mother's sister, a woman who had always been closer to Vanessa, called me on a Sunday evening and said, your grandmother would be so proud of you. She always said you were the strong one. I should have listened to her better. I didn't need the validation, but I won't pretend it didn't mean something. The house on Clover Lane sold 8 months later. With my half, I paid off my remaining student loans and put a down payment on a small house of my own, a quiet place with a backyard and room for a garden, the kind of place I'd been working toward for years without letting myself believe I deserved it. The last thing I took from Grandma Ruth's house before the sale closed was a framed photograph from her bedroom. It's the 2 of us at her kitchen table, me maybe 25, her in her housecoat with a cup of coffee, both of us laughing at something I can't remember anymore. She's looking at the camera, but I'm looking at her. I have it on my mantle now. Some people spend their whole lives performing love, making sure it's seen, making sure it's credited, making sure it pays off. Grandma Ruth taught me something different. She taught me that real love doesn't need an audience. It just needs to show up. And in the end, the truth about who showed up, that always comes out. Maybe not the way you expect. Maybe not on your timeline. But it comes out. She made sure of that.